Sunday, 11 a.m. My task is to find a hiding place for Mrs. Gumley's dress. Could I throw it back over the fence, or could I wait until she claims it? What if she tells my parents, when I was with Sandy, I took off my dress so I wouldn't run away? What I do next is hard to admit, but as other people's privacy is compelling, and I'm in the business of trying to compel, what the heck? I hold Mrs. Gumley's dress over me so it dangles above my body like baffling in a large hall. Then I move it slowly up and down my torso. I enjoy this until I sit on my shoulder and see how unsettling I look. Realizing I'm doing something weird, I wrap the dress in a wetsuit and stuff it back in the cupboard next to the pink box. 11:10 a.m. Unorganized the keg? My mother asks as I appear in the kitchen ready to devour a skyscraper of French toast. Under control, Mummy. Naturally, I use the word mummy ironically, and as a reward, she makes me a steak sandwich. How are the RSVPs? She asks. Slow, I say. That's good, darling. Maybe Mrs. Gumley is on my mind and I'm thinking aloud. This happens to only children. You spend so much time by yourself and sometimes you forget you're not always alone. I suppose that's why I say what I say next. Okay, let's be honest, Sandy. I really want to find out what my mother knows about Mrs. Gumley, and the only way to do that is to tease it out of her. So I throw out some burley. Mrs. Gumley's quite attractive for her age, isn't she? Egg, darling? She's been beautiful in a day. Cut diagonally or across, darling. I saw her last night and... I deliberately stop, knowing that a closed door creates interest. Where? My mother says. The movies, I say. What did you see? The Blue Max. Oh, I wish I'd thought of a contemporary movie, but I'm thinking on the run here. As I eat, my mother relates the following anecdote. Note well, I've taken a few liberties with the story because sometimes when I eat, I find it hard to concentrate and I always miss a few details. It also took me a lot longer to get my mother started on this story than it reads, but for the sake of pace, I've just supplied the bare essentials. Mum's anecdote about Coral and the Prince. Coral listened to the local radio station every day, particularly to this one bright spark called the Prince on the breakfast show, who played the part of a swinging bachelor to a T. He still works at the station, but not on the breakfast show anymore. Coral never missed him. Whenever the Prince was on, she practically talked to the radio. Sometimes it seemed as though the Prince understood what Coral was saying, because their conversations appeared to link up. I suppose Clive, being a baker and working long hours, meant he was rarely home, and when he was home, he was tired, so the radio provided some companionship for Coral. Mum said Coral rang the station at least twice a week, and after a while they started putting her to air. Apparently, she was amusing too, inviting the Prince for dinner, letting him flirt with her, fantasizing about what might happen after a few drinks and so on. The radio station suddenly saw in Coral a good promotion just waiting to happen, so they arranged for this dinner, along with a live broadcast, to be staged at Coral's house. The tech people came, the PR people came, the date was set. Then suddenly it was off. No explanation, no apology. 2 months later, the same concept is held at the Gumleys' place. Think about it. Mr. Gumley's new to the area, trying to establish a business. He needs advertising. So he bought his way into the idea at Coral's expense. That dinner kick-started the Gumleys in this area. And believe me, says my mum, when push came to shove, she was involved up to her neck too, in those mini dresses, flirting with the radio people. Oh yes, she played her part. The only consolation for Coral was the prince turned out to be this horrible little man with ginger mutton chops and tight white pants who bagged everything and everyone while he was off air. People resented the Gumleys for what they did to Coral. 11:55 a.m. Pleasant Avenue is rarely active on Sunday mornings. If Pleasant Avenue was a lagoon, the water would be like glass. Occasionally, a zephyr of breeze disturbs the surface. The bang of a screen door, the paperboy's whistle, causing a fan of goose pimples to appear, but generally there's absolutely no movement. Under the surface, of course, it's a very different story. As I make my way onto the street to confirm Mum's bizarre anecdote, I can't help noticing Mr. Price's Venetians bend down. I'm definitely under surveillance. Should I wave? Probably best to let him think I don't know he's watching. Without being obvious, I stand in line with Mr. Price's window to see what he sees when he looks at our house. There's too much angle for him to see my room, but he can certainly see my parents' room. I can't remember being inside Mr. Price's house. I've been inside Niall's place, the Gumleys, the Melvies and Lexi Threes, but I only see Mr. Price in front of his house or standing at his window. There he is now, running down the side path holding a package. Boy, he gets from that window to the front of the house fast. 12:04 p.m. I use the front door at Coral's. My spontaneity catches everyone off guard, including Amigo, because when Nev answers the door, there's no barking. The first thing Nev says when he sees me is, "Everything's sweet with the keg, Sandy. One you, one on reserve." Geez, fired up about the keg. When I say, "I might not have a keg," Nev's face changes to that of a 10-year-old being told he has to come inside for a shower because he's going to his nana's. Don't get me wrong, I want a keg, I add, trying to save face in front of another man. She doesn't want it. She, he says, my mother. His eyes linger on me like spotlights on a terrified wallaby. Ah, bugger it, count me in. Yep, I'm definitely in. Coral's ironing in the kitchen. She looks up when she sees me enter and says, "Hot dog?" A hot dog is a peck on the cheek. Steak sandwiches are hugs. Baked dinners are real big love-ups. "Excelsior!" I say, trying to stop a grin from exploding all over my face. She tilts her head and looks at me like a puppy who's baffled about something because "Excelsior" is one of the Prince's old catchphrases. Whenever a listener was being amusing, the Prince screamed, "Excelsior!" It caught on at our school for a while. She knows I know about the Prince, but she's pretending not to know that I know. Look at her. Still listen to the radio, Auntie Coral? I say, twisting the knife, barely containing my glee. Tomato sauce? I fire off another question. Didn't you have one of the announcers over here for dinner once? No. I thought you had that Prince guy over for dinner. She shakes her head. They were going to do a live broadcast, weren't they? I'm like an experienced barrister the way I'm herding her into a corner. My mother says I should do law, if only I could pass the HSC. However, Coral puts me off guard when she fires me a curved ball. Clive didn't want the broadcast. What? We were going to have it, but you must understand, Sandy, women of my generation always did what their husbands said. Two things stick in my mind from this encounter. Coral ironed the same item of clothing throughout the entire conversation, and I didn't get the hot dog she promised. By the way, what does the Prince look like? Little, she says. Nice guy? Not really.